Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brent, and we're here at Andreas, Porsche 944 specialist in Charlotte. Hope everybody's having a great Sunday. I was just wondering what I've done with my tripod, but we'll get started without it. So usually we just come in and hang out, and I take your questions and try and work on some cars. So first of all, I just want to hear what everybody's working on today. It's a nice day out there. Hope everybody's also having a nice day. It's not too hot. It's been in the 90s. So we had to cram a lot of cars in here this week. Just that way we didn't have to work outside. As you can see, we're overflowing in here. And so sometimes we still have to go out there and get stuff done when possible. I also want to thank someone who made this for me. It's a full cover all set with my name, logo, and that I got his letter over here. It's usually too hot to wear coveralls, but actually these feel pretty nice. Let's see if I can figure out what to do with the note. But his nickname is Trouble. I'll just leave it at that. If he wants me to say his name, and we'll get into that later. But anyway. Again, guys, I'll show you some of the stuff we're working on, and let me know if you have any questions. Sometimes the live streams start off a little slow, and then they get a little more interesting as we get into them. We have the pearl white car back from paint now, and it's getting assembled. So from what I understand, they're only made about 250 944 turbos in 1986 in pearl white. So this thing was beat up pretty bad when we got it, but now it's nice and beautiful. If I'll need decals and badges going on. The mirrors have got to go back on. The interior was taken apart. The doors were taken off. Glass was out. Didier says, "Hi, Brent." Well, hi to you. Hope you're having a great Sunday. We'll look around and see what I do with my tripod. I'd like to get started on this bumper. Let's see if we can do it. Sometimes I try and work during the live streams and it doesn't always work out. I found it. Okay, let me see. I'll read that out loud here. Sometimes I read the comments before I read them out loud. Okay, here we go. Shane Does Car Stuff says, "Good morning, Brent. Meant to send you a message last night to give you a warning, but wondered if you could do some sort of overview of the drivetrain and condition noises, problems, etc." Okay, yeah, sure, we can do that. So let's start with the basics. Got about 90 people in here right now, so hello to everyone. So I'm gonna guess that some of you are unfamiliar with we had some drop, but still got a good amount in here. Just remember, I can't see who you are. Not unless you comment. That's the only way I can see you. So don't feel embarrassed if you're watching the live stream and you're like, oh, hope you can't see me. No, I can't see you. But appreciate you all being here. Let's see. All right, an overview of the 944 drivetrain is that it is front engine with a rear transmission, and that rear transmission receives its power from the torque tube. I usually have a torque tube laying around here, but you can see it on this car here. So engine sits up here, and then power's transferred to the transmission in the rear via that torque tube, similar to a not current generation Corvette, but the last generation Corvette, 97 and up. So when a torque tube is going out, you'll sometimes hear noises coming from the bearings. I believe there's 3 or 4 bearings in there. I won't say 4. But you can put it in neutral and you'll sometimes hear clacking, but that's not always a tell. Sometimes you'll just hear the transmission making noises. So what we do here is, I don't know if this car is in neutral, and I don't know that I can reach over there far enough to grab that torque tube and spin it, but let's see. Yeah, we're in neutral, so I'm hearing a little bit of clunking there, but that's just the input shaft on the transmission. So raise the rear up, start the car, put it in neutral, and if you hear, sometimes you're going to hear rattling, it's just the input shaft. So you're mainly going to hear some groaning from the bearings. A lot of times you just got to get them out and disconnect the transmission. So you press the clutch. Now if you do it from the back side, you take the clutch, the transmission out, and you push the clutch in and you spin it. It should spin pretty freely and you shouldn't hear any noises. But so really hard to describe, but you have to isolate it down to the torque tube, because in this car the torque tube's fine, but you can still hear like a little clunking, but that's from the input shaft in the transmission itself. That's going to turn whenever you turn the torque tube and the transmission's in. So getting into transaxle noises, they shouldn't make any noise at all. I sometimes hear them. You'll hear that kind of like whirring sound when you're in reverse, which is perfectly normal, but fifth gear and stuff shouldn't make any noise. They should be completely silent, and it doesn't matter whether or not you have the carpet in the back or not. The transmission should be pretty quiet. Continuing with the drivetrain, I have seen the on the tip of my tongue, the differential blow a few times, and too much power to these cars are just dumping the clutch. The gear down will just shatter these, especially in naturally aspirated cars. And that's when you start hearing the whir, but you're going to start noticing that there's going to be sort of like it's going to raise the car up. So when those are gone, you pretty much know. There's no real noise associated with those. It's just sort of, you hear some crunching and you'll notice the car kind of lurches. But connected to that transmission is 2 axles, 2 CV axles, and you can almost verify these by just driving down the road, going across a bridge and having it echo back to you with the window down. You'll hear kind of like a shh to start out with. That's your CV axle. And then in worst case scenario, you're going to start hearing clicks and pops. Not as bad as you would in a front wheel drive, because this doesn't actually turn with the wheel. There's no steering back there. But yeah, that's a brief overview of everything. It's a let's see. Someone says, no way, I stumbled upon another 924, 944. Well, awesome. Yeah, glad you're here. We are, if you've never heard of us, we're a Porsche specialist in Charlotte, and we have about 16, 17 cars at any one time, doing various stuff from, in this case over here, we've pretty much taken everything out of it. We didn't do the paint on this car, but we've taken everything out of it. Removed all the rust and dirt, replaced pretty much everything in the suspension. It's getting an all new engine, it has a new dashboard. We're talking brand new from Porsche. And in this car here, it's getting paint. So we do the body work, but we send it off to paint, have it painted there. And sometimes they finish up a few things, odds and ends, but we take all the glass out and all the mirrors and stuff here. We take the bumpers off. And then we got to go back and put all that back on there with new badges and stuff. And then with this one here, this one's going to get pretty much the same thing, but it's also getting a paint job. So this is getting turbocharged. So it started life as an 87 924S, and now it's going to be about a 300 horsepower 924S turbo. So it'll have a 944 turbo engine in it. Just to be clear, not the 2-liter. And this car came in, as you can see, it definitely needs some paint, and that's what it's going to get. But the engine was also just had some leaks and it was really dirty, so we cleaned it up, and it's getting ready to go back together. Somebody had put the OPRV in with a, I can only guess, an air hammer, and we could not get it out, so that went to the machine shop. Once that comes back, we're going to put this back together. And the engine will run, and we'll get it to paint. Awesome. So you got a 924 turbo. We don't see a lot of those. I've seen a few down at 944 barn, but haven't seen a 924 turbo around here in a while. Goofy says hi there. Well, hi Goofy. Bad Boy says I hear squeaking from my pulleys, but when I take the belt off and spin them, no sound. Also when the AC turns on, it's squeaking. It could be the compressor itself, so it might only see if it happens when the compressor is engaged, or I've even seen the alternator do this. What I mostly see with the alternators is someone will start their car and they hear like a clack from the back of the engine. Now why it reverberates at the back of the engine, I have no idea, but it always sounds like something's wrong with the engine, and it's the alternator. But as far as squealing, I would definitely check that. Sometimes the belts are just completely wore out, so you can tighten them up all you want, and it'll still squeal just due to the belt being completely worn out. I've even had, I have to write on my invoices if we put Continental belts on something that it needs to be retention after a couple of 100 miles, because we can tighten them up all we want, but they get loose and then they will squeal like crazy until they're retightened. Jim Donut says hello. Well, hello, Jim. Shane Does Car Stuff says, awesome, thanks for that. What about noises from the shifter? Are you talking about buzzing noises? That's what I'm guessing. So we'll go with that. So if you're hearing like a buzzing noise from the shifter, there's a lot of things going on with that. So let me see if I can find the shifter here that's just kind of laying around. So most of the time it's a buzz. So from the factory, Porsche wanted these cars to be as refined as possible, and that's almost impossible to do with a large 4-cylinder. So you not only have vibrations from the pistons at their 180-degree firing order, but you also have the pistons pulling up on the engine. So if you got vibrations, it's pretty common, but the vibrations shouldn't really make it past the engine mounts if you have good engine mounts. But of course the torque tube and is connected directly to the engine, and therefore it's going to carry some of that, and the shifters bolted directly to the torque tube. So what Porsche did was they put bushings in there, so that dampened it somewhat. So I see a lot of guys, what they'll do is they'll remove the original shifter and they'll put like a Momo shifter in there, but now you don't have anything to isolate you from the vibration that the engine is creating, and you can get noises that way. Or sometimes as the it's well known that the shifter just wears out over time, it becomes a barrel shape. So when that gets loose, you just get noises in your shifter, and it's all coming from the engine. And of course it does directly tie into the transmission back there, but the transmission doesn't really make a lot of noise. I mean, unless there's something wrong with it, there shouldn't be any vibrations necessarily from the transmission. You're going to get some, but the transmission is the least of your worries. So you're probably hearing, especially at certain RPMs, just the vibration of the engine coming through. So check your bushings, check that the shift lever itself isn't worn out, and that should get you in the right direction. A lot of people will add aftermarket ones that have bolts, and it does away with a lot of that. So he said, 100% Canadian says, my 924 turbo, when I bought it, had to put a new fuel distributor in it and had the wrong one for a different car. I'm not surprised. I get a lot of guys in here, they'll see a 924 or 924 turbo on the side of the road, and they're like, can you restore it for me? And I'm like, wouldn't start with one. But the fuel distributors are always fun on this car, so if you get the wrong part, that just makes it all the more exciting. Didier says, turbocharging a 924S, do you need to change the block just to swap the NA parts to the turbo ones? So we just go ahead and swap everything. We just buy the complete engine, rebuild the complete engine, and do it that way. You can, since it's an 87, 87 is going to be the same block. It's even going to have the oil ports on the balance shafts for the turbo feed, and so it's no difference. So you can actually do that, and many times, you know, somebody will call me up and they say, hey, I just need a turbo block, and I don't really care about it being a 951 block. We'll use an 87 block for it. But in this case, whenever we're turbocharging these cars here, we put the 5.1 engines in there. Hi there, I have an 89 S2 where the shift knob rattles at 3,000 RPMs in all gears. Any ideas what that could be? So yeah, that is the frequency at which the engine particularly likes to make noise. So if it's a small rattle, sometimes you're going to want to make sure. So the first thing you'd want to do is make sure that your balance shafts are in time. That's going to get rid of most of it, but balance shafts don't completely eliminate that. You're still going to have some vibration there. The next thing to do is, even though it is directly bolted to your engine, the torque tube and the shifter that is, the next thing to do is look at your motor mounts and make sure they're in good condition, because a lot of the 968s that I drive, especially the 968s, they were so refined at that point that you really didn't feel anything or hear anything through the shifters. But even the later 944s were really good about being very smooth. But you get the 924S, it might be an 87 and has the same mounts as an 87, and yet they still have that little bit of a buzz, and my 924S personally, if you stick your hand on the shifter, you can, it doesn't buzz at a particular RPM, but you'll feel the engine like the entire time you're driving it, just due to lack of refinement they did to the 24Ss and stuff. So check those things out. And again, it doesn't matter if any of that is perfect. You can have perfect engine mounts, you can have perfectly timed balance shafts. The engine's still just going to make a vibration, and it could just be that your shifter itself is worn out and it's being affected by that. And if you have an aftermarket shifter that's like bolted correctly directly to it, then that's going to make the vibrations worse because you no longer have any isolation between you and the engine. How much power would you guess an 86 944 turbo has with a rebuilt K26-8 turbo at wastegate and 3-inch exhaust? Well, I don't know anything about how much boost you're running, and that would really tell me everything. So you got a 3-inch exhaust with a rebuilt K28 and a 3-inch exhaust. I mean, you could probably be over 300 horsepower or better, but without knowing exactly how much boost you're running, it would be almost impossible. You could be, and I see a lot of turbos in here that have a lot of stock stuff on them, and so they should be making 217, but I cannot walk them because they don't hit boost till like 4,000 RPMs because people have done their cycling valves gone out, or they'll put just gimmicky stuff on here, and now they don't hit 15 psi until like 4,000 RPMs. But after that they make a lot of power, but it makes them very laggy, so it's always hard to say. You might get it on the dyno and break records, but it's very hard to say without knowing the boost level and what all's been done to it to sort of get that boost to the engine. As far as wastegate goes, you have an aftermarket wastegate, but is it mechanical? Is it even electronic will make a huge difference in how the car drives and how much power you put down. John Bo says, "Hi Brent, sorry, well, it's always good to see you again. Glad you're back. It's no problem. I understand." So do you have any knowledge of removing the Evap system on a US 944 spec? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So if you're gonna run 944 spec and you don't have to have emissions and stuff, then you can just take, there's gonna be a hose coming off the fuel tank, and that little plastic line runs off the top. And then it runs right up beside the fuel lines. This is an early car. Most 944 specs are early cars, but not always. I've built a few that weren't. But in this case, that plastic line comes with the fuel lines and comes over here. And you can just take that plastic line off up there. I mean, really removing the evaporation. The emission system is not really going to do all that much, but if you want it gone, just put you a little filter on there, cut it back at the trans, take all that plastic hose out, drop the charcoal canister, remove your shut-off valves here. I believe that's not the shut-off, it's called something valve. It's not coming to me, but yeah, remove that stuff. I've got one here on the floor, I think. It's the something valve, shut-off valves for turbo, or cut-off valve. It's called something similar to that. But yeah, I got one laying on the floor here. Take all that out and that's it, the end. And then there's like some vacuum lines that run to it. Just make sure you just delete those. Easy peasy. Drop charcoal canister out of the fender and you're done. Says, do you have a video addressing the specifications of the balance shaft timing? Yes, I do. It's a very old video, but it's still on YouTube somewhere. So he said, I wonder what happened to Nancy. I have not had time to set anything up. I have been pretty busy, but I'm sure he has too. We'll try and see if we can set something up with that. I have a few other guys that I want to get on the show, and just hasn't worked out. Subliminal says, top of the pistons in my 86 turbo are covered in carbon buildup due to seals on the turbo being bad before rebuilt. That's the best way to clean that. So I would just get some detergent, put it in there. Not like detergent. I would fuel additive detergent, I should say, and let it slowly come off there. That way, if you don't want to take the engine apart. Other than that, if you've got the, I mean, it could be that you have the head off right now. So if you have the head off, the best thing to do is put the engine at top dead center and just wipe it. Don't have to be perfectly clean. It's not that serious. I see people put Scotch-Brite pads on their pistons and stuff, and don't have to do any of that. Just you're trying to get stuff out of there. Scotch-Brite pads have aluminum in them, and you're just going to put aluminum down in your cylinder, and you run the risk of scuffing cylinders and stuff. So, you know, if it's still kind of like the slimy, gooey stuff, just wipe it off there and do your best with it. But if it's hardened, then yeah, don't scrub it. Just sometimes what we'll do is we'll take a little bit of degreaser and we'll spritz it on there to soften it up a little bit. But well, you have to make sure that you don't get it down in the cylinders and get it down past the rings, because it's going to carry any of that trash into your rings. So you want to just wipe it off. Anything that's in there, it's going to burn off, and I wouldn't go crazy with it. The first time you know, we get beautiful engines all the time. You know, we build them, they look brand new, but the first time you run them for more than half an hour, they're going to look just like the rest of them. So he says the head isn't off. Yeah, I would just get some. There's fuel additives and stuff. Normally I don't recommend stuff like that, but something like that would probably just clean it off. Put one in per tank, like next 3 tanks, and just so I was thinking of pouring seafoam. That's not a bad idea. My only thing is we have to do that too. We sometimes have cars, we'll get cars in here that have 25, even 35,000 miles, and they've been sitting since the 90s, and we have to put seafoam down in there. Now, given the pistons aren't terribly carboned up, they've just been sitting for so long, and we have to put seafoam in there. Just make sure you change your oil afterwards, but it should be good. But if it's hard and crusty, it's one of those things where you just want to make sure it's clean. But at least carbon is less likely to scratch than you putting aluminum Scotch-Brite pads or something down in there. So yeah, I mean, it's worth a shot. We don't run into that very often. Usually, a lot of times the engines that are here are coming apart. So we did that. Now this engine here, it had bad valve stem seals, and it was very dirty on top of the engine, and we just took them and wiped them off, and that was pretty much it. Did the trick. Yeah, so once you put the seafoam in there, and you might have to bet. What we do is when we seafoam it, we will actually use a shop vac with a straw and suck it out there. Suck it out the best we can, let it dry, change the oil, and I'll even put just like a thimble's worth of oil in the cylinder, and then I rotate the engine a couple of times. Do it by hand. Since the engine's at the side, it's really hard to get that upper part lubricated, so cycling it will help push it around the rings and everything. And then I don't even put enough in there to like, it lubricates the cylinder walls, but it's not enough to even cause it to smoke when you start it up. Yeah, Jeffrey said not recommended, but I remember my dad pouring water down the carburetor to remove carb. I've heard of that old trick, and it does work. Unfortunately, on fuel injected cars, you're not gonna be able to do that so easily. You could probably add some water to your fuel, but yeah, don't do that. But yeah, I've even seen that work. I'm that old that I've seen people do that, and that worked a little bit. But yeah, just soak it in seafoam, vacuum it out, and change the oil. Maybe put a little bit of oil in the cylinders. And I think seafoam's a decent lubricator. It's not like fuel. If you put fuel in there, you'll seize your engine. Don't try and clean with fuel. But probably do it with diesel. But I think seafoam's the better way to go with that. And just change it out and you'll be good to go. But like I said, I would say that 90% of the time the heads are coming off these cars. If they're original, we're taking them off, because if you've seen some of my earlier videos, almost every single one of these 83, 84 cars by now, they're all leaking coolant onto the ground. And it's only a matter of time before that's going to start going in the cylinders. So it's just a good idea to change all the head gaskets at this point. Took my 87 NA for the longest drive of the car yet. In 95-degree heat here in Tennessee. Car drove great, other than trying to decide how much drivetrain noise is normal on these. Hence the question. Oh, well, awesome. Glad to hear that. So, yeah, I mean, I drive cars that are perfectly fine and they have some drivetrain noise. What year is your car? I would say that the later cars are much more refined. If you have an early car, if it doesn't sound like a clack or a squeak or something, it's probably normal. Especially at this point. But I would say that like back in the day they were pretty quiet. So I have a 924S that's pretty much the same as my mom's car. Both of them, and hers is 84. Both of them had the same amount of work done to them, and the 24S is just so much quieter. But there shouldn't be anything that sounds really bizarre. A lot of times I'll hear transmission whining and stuff in certain gears, and that's not normal. But I've seen people drive those cars for 100,000 miles, no problem. He said, I was very impressed with how the cooling system seemed to be working, though. Never really got above a quarter and a half mark until I sat idling about 15 minutes, and it just got to half. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Great to hear that, especially in 95-degree heat. So at least you got the cooling system right. Now it's just trying to figure out drivetrain noises. But I would start with the CD axles. If they haven't been changed in a while, that's the first thing to look at. The boot grease dries up. Well, you can always scan it with an infrared thermometer if you're worried that your gauge isn't working. We keep these here. Let me choose the wrong drawer first. Where is it? Ah, there it is. I did choose the right drawer. It was way back in the back though. So we just use these here. So what you can do is, if you have any questions, scan like about right there with your engine warmed up. Your temp sensor is going to be where that red dot is, right there in the head. But there's going to be stuff in the way. So you can scan anywhere around that area and even here and see what your, this is where it's going to be the hottest because this is coming up going to the radiator. So if everything's circulating properly, it's coming past that and then it's going out right here and then going to the radiator. So this is usually your hottest point, but scanning around the head and everything is perfectly fine as well. Let's put the camera back. All right. Where is the radio relay on an 83 manual sunroof? Oh, that's a good question. Very good question. I want to say that it is where I've had two 83s. I've owned them, and I don't know that I've ever messed with the radio relay. But I know since you have the manual roof, you're not going to have that big relay. I'm trying to think if I got 83 here. But what also happens is if it's not where I think it is, it's supposed to be mounted. If you go in the driver's side, we're assuming you have an American car or a US car, you get in to the driver's side and you look up towards the HVAC system. It should be that you'll see a little AC actuator there. So it looks like a, well, right there bolted to the bottom of the dash strap, there should be a relay. That's where the relay's supposed to be for the radio. It won't be a big one, but that's where it should be. Now, that said, next to it is also supposed to be the window relay, window regulator relays. But those are always almost dropped off and then just shoved somewhere up underneath the dash. So you might have to go on an Easter egg hunt for them. What is the typical temp I should see there? So it's going to depend on your thermostat. I got something going on out here. Just hearing noise and people talking. Okay, so usually it's about 20 degrees more than what your thermostat reads. So we'll say if you're running an 80C thermostat, you're gonna see about 90C there. 80C is what, like 160-ish degrees? So you're probably going to see about 180 something degrees at the top. I'm just spitballing. Not sure exactly. That's the ballpark. So I'd expect to see 20 degrees more here than your thermostat. So basically it will come in, the thermostat will open at 80C and lets cooler cooling in, and then it'll spit it out about 20 degrees hotter. Okay. John says, after finding an oil leak on my camshaft in my 87S, I was scratching my head wondering what the black plastic thingies are for. Turns out the rocker covers are the same as the 924S. So you're talking about the plastic seals in there? So yeah, this is a 68, but this should have the same thing. And I believe that the 68s also used a version of the 928 camcorder cover that was later on. I might be wrong, but I know that, yeah. So you just bought a new cam cover? Oh, I see what he's saying. So you ended up buying a new cam cover and it was off a 928? Yeah, yeah, that's what I was thinking. So you just ended up getting the seals. Okay, that's what I was originally thinking. Okay. Yep, anytime those come off, it's a very good idea to just replace those black seals on the studs. Ethan says, I have the dash out. Interesting. Okay, the dash is out. Then there should just be, it'll probably be a small relay. I think on the 83s you only have, there's not a lot of circuitry. It's probably just a 4-post relay or 4-prong. I was gonna see if I couldn't get them out books, but the later sunroof relay and the radio relay also does something else. But it's possible that someone has taken it out. And, you know, like I said, I've owned 2 of those. It's also possible Porsche didn't even put a relay in there. This is the engine. I need electronics. Oh. That's the one thing I never really paid attention to. It just kind of worked. So I didn't go searching for the relay. But there's probably a few schematics online you could probably search around in and see the early car layout, and hopefully you find it. There are a lot of plugs that look like relay sockets underneath the dash that look like they do something, but they're for additional optional things. So you should have a fog light relay up underneath there. You should have a 4-post window winder relay underneath there, and then you should have a radio relay under there. Oh, you're talking, oh, John's saying the rocker cover on the, I got you, I got you. Yes, those are the same as the 928. Yeah, okay, I got you. So your oil leak was from right there. Oh, interesting. Great time to turn the camera back around when those itches. But, I'll see. My car is not basking in the sun right now. I parked it in the shade this morning, and now it's, oh, it's not in the shade anymore. So here's an 84 for reference. And that's probably the window regulator there. And mounted here is supposed to be the radio relay, but you can see the screw is gone. Now this car here is just, it's got some goofy stuff going on. You can see speaker wire used to do stuff, but it all works. So I just mainly leave it alone. But this is where the radio relay should be mounted. Little gray, I believe it might, well, if someone's changed it, it might be black. But yeah, just look around for some relays. Look for some relay sockets and then just try plugging in some relays and just see if, like, maybe someone just, I've seen that. many times. We had a car here where it was an 84. They couldn't get the radio to working, and ended up just someone took the relay out of it, and they'd wired all new wiring from the battery, hacked it in and all that, and I just put a new relay and that worked perfect. So, but yeah, just kind of keep an eye. There's a few sockets down in there that aren't used for anything, so you may look up underneath there and see sockets, but just try plugging some relays in and just seeing which one comes out. There's got to be some way of knowing. If you find the schematic, they'll probably point you to the right direction. A later car here that's finally ready to go home. The owner had taken the seat out, but he's going to put it back in when he gets home. He had to remove pretty much the whole interior to get some of that stuff in there. It's finally ready. All right, guys. I'm gonna get back to work. I'm gonna try and put this Euro bumper on today, or at least get it together where I put the Euro bumper on. And then I still have to hook up the sprayers for the headlight washers here, and then this can finally go back on. You can see I got some overspray to clean up down here, but we'll get that cleaned off. So what we do with this is that's a good place to use some of those Scotch-Brite pads. They'll take some of that overspray. As long as it's not painted, it's just overspray. It'll wipe it right off and it won't scratch anything too deeply. But it's a good way to get your plastics looking new. And if it is painted, then we will replace it with one that's not painted. But then we'll get it all back on. We want this car to look as close to new as we can. But so far, she looks pretty good. She's dirty, but she looks pretty good. It was a little wet that day, moving it in here, and just people touching it with their dirty hands and stuff. But we'll get it cleaned up, and hopefully we'll have this back on the road in no time. So anyway, guys, that's what I'm working on today. Thank you guys for letting me know what you worked on, and we're going to take off and get back to work. I appreciate you coming out, and I hope to see you again next week. So we'll see you then. Have a good week.